Welcome, everyone, to Leading Together Podcast, FSE's podcast with insights for Delaware's tomorrow. In each episode, we sit down with the top minds and leaders in Delaware and to help us shape our perspectives and advance FSE's mission, which is to build capacity, raise awareness, and elevate school board leadership across our communities. And today, I am so fortunate to have my dear friend Dave Tiberi with us as a guest. Dave is a man whose impact extends far beyond the boxing ring, even because he's known as the Uncrowned Champion. He is just inside Delaware and outside, just famous, right? But his work, I mean, from his early career until now, it's just this legacy of doing good and fighting for what's right and bringing fairness to the forefront. He's worked with leaders like Joe Biden and John McCain. He's worked on national legislation. He cares about health and safety. You know, he has a whole wealth of information and insights to share with us. And in addition to all the things that he's done in his professional role, he runs the Emergency Response Protocol. He's the president of that organization, and he's committed to helping schools with their safety and security needs, as well as businesses and communities. He also founded Delaware Decision Makers, which is a forum uniting leaders from all sectors to advance progress across the state. He's been on multiple boards, including the Boys and Girls Club. He's worked with the Sunday Breakfast Mission. He's worked with St. Francis Hospital. And he also, and you must be asking yourself at this point, where does this man get all the time to be able to do all of these amazing things? And I ask myself that question often, but he also started Donate Delaware. So without further ado, I want to welcome our guest. Welcome, Dave. Today in this conversation, we're just going to talk about his insights and the leadership ideas that he has to offer to our school boards around the power of mentorship and overcoming challenges, collaboration, and how to work together. So Dave, I am one of your biggest fans. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun. Anytime it's to promote and market Delaware, I'm all for it.
So. It's fabulous. So let's I sort of gave the teaser about, boxing champion here, right? So would you do me the honor of just sharing a little bit for those of you who haven't heard it from you personally or haven't read your book about kind of how you got into boxing and how fighting in the ring sort of led to this fight for justice?
Well, I would have to start when I was 5. I started boxing when I was 5 years old, and people said, "Well, how'd you get into boxing?" I said, "I had no choice. I had 11 older brothers." So I'm one of 14 kids. I have 11 brothers and 2 sisters, and so growing up, being the youngest boy, it was a little tough. But we would as siblings would find things to do, and it was the backyard play was a little rough. But I remember a couple of the brothers started driving us to local gyms, boxing gyms. And being the youngest brother, I would be the hot dog and I would be the one that they would protect. But at the same time, it helped me learn their styles and what they were good at and where they needed. I would just listen to the trainers and listen to them. And it created a lot of opportunities for me in the boxing ring and outside the boxing ring. I ended up having the privilege of fighting for 2 world titles. I had over 20 fights on network television. At the time, it was really big, ESPN, USA TV Network. And but I also was looking outside the ring. Like, I just know as one of 14 kids how hard it was, because I remember how people would judge us because they would with 14 kids, they would judge my parents. And I knew that I wanted to do more in the community because of that, because my parents had a lot of kids, and I was blessed that they had a lot of kids because I wouldn't be around if they would have stopped at 12. Number 13, I just looked at that lucky number 13 and said, well, I was blessed to be put in a situation where I had brothers that really helped mentor me and friends that mentored me in the boxing area. But I also knew there had to be a future after professional sports. And so while I was boxing and I met a lot of key people, I would also save phone numbers and make sure that as I did TV interviews and I did a lot of speaking banquets, I also at a young age started joining boards because I just knew I knew that organizations that were out in the community making a difference. And when I would go out and speak and I would see the great work of the Boys and Girls Clubs, and I was a kid, I was a Boys and Girls Club kid. I would see the organizations that I benefited from, and I said, I'm going to give back. So at a young age, I joined my first board like at 17 years old.
Did you really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was
Wow.
very young. So I
Okay.
started getting involved. I turned pro at 8. I left college after my first year to pursue a professional boxing career. And that was very hard because it meant a lot to me. And I always said someday I'm going to go back and finish my degree. But I also knew that as a boxer, I was concerned. I didn't want to be 25, 30 years old and still lacing them up. So
Right.
I was 4% body fat, the best shape you could be in boxing. But I also knew I had to be careful in the ring because a lot of fighters suffer what they call pugilistic dementia. And I didn't want to leave boxing. I wanted to be more of a role model for boxing, not more of a hindrance. Like there's another one of those guys. And so in the sport of boxing, it created those opportunities. And then as I started joining boards, I also started speaking at the American Cancer Society. Both my parents had cancer. I started really giving my time back to the community more than ever, using my boxing platform.
That's fabulous. And your commitment to Delaware is really just honorable and remarkable. I mean, you have a life of public service. You volunteer, you give of your time, you start these organizations. I have always found you to be a person who consistently looks to help others. And I think that that's a rare thing in the world. And and it's just for the greater good. And I think that that's really, really admirable. And it's something, to tie back to the boards, really board service, right? School board service is about the greater good. It's acting in an altruistic way, right? To try to do what's best for kids.
Yeah. And Julia, my Christian faith means a lot to me. And I believe with that, there's parameters about, it helps me with balances because it's so easy to get off the rails in life. But if I'm serving on something or if I'm involved with something, in this case, let's say a school board, I always thought, like, I live in a Ray Clay school district. And I thought, well, if I join the board, I've got to first of all figure out what I bring to the table. But also then I would look and say, and I serve as like the boards I serve on, I always look at it this way. I'm always looking broader. Like, what other organizations can I be involved with that could complement the board that I serve on? So if I serve on Ray Clay board, for example, I want to make sure that since I'm working with kids, then maybe I'm going to reach out to the Boys and Girls Clubs and join their board or a committee.
Yeah.
So I find out outside of the district what's going on. So that's the way I like to operate. I do serve on a lot of boards, probably more than most people. I serve on Christiana Care's foundation board. And because I'm doing a lot with Donate Delaware Medical Supplies now. So who better to partner with than Christiana Care, the largest hospital in our area. So when I do these things, I always look at things that would complement what I'm doing, because then it puts me on the outside looking in. I'm on the inside now, but I can also go on the outside looking in, and I can see both sides, where a lot of people that are just one-dimensional won't be able to see those type of things.
Right, exactly.
It gives me opportunity to be able to participate at different levels. In this case, education. If I'm on a Ray Clay board, what other boards, Latin American communities, so what other boards or committees can I serve on that complements my overall mission at the Ray Clay?
I love that. I love this notion of connecting the dots and sort of looking at the larger ecosystem. I think inherent in that, and it's another strength that I think you have as an individual that's unique, is you're just so ready to engage with other. I mean, you go up to people, you ask and sincerely wait for the answer of like, how are you? Can I do something for you? Tell me about that. I mean, you have this sort of natural curiosity about how people are experiencing their life. And I think that's also very important when it comes to connecting the dots, because you're listening.
Yeah, it's interesting. The United States Junior Chamber of Commerce, one year I was honored to receive an award from them. And I remember when the president first walked up of the national organization out in Oklahoma, and he said, our slogan is right to the point. He says, service to humanity is the best work of life. And so I remember, it's very brief, but right to the point, service to humanity is the best work of life. And so if people aren't working together, the Bible says a house divided will fall. So if we have a school district or a private school district, a charter school, and we have a surrounding community that doesn't participate, that's to me a house divided.
Right.
Now, unity to me is if I'm serving on a board, I want to find out all the other, like right now with Donate Delaware, we have so many nonprofit. When people see our flyer and they're like, "Oh my God, how many nonprofit?" We have a page of nonprofit partners because we need to know that if somebody calls me and said, "I have a need for a medical supply," more than likely, food banks are a great partner of ours. They might need a box of food, or the Dream Center will give them a box of food, or we figure out where the other partners are. That's something we can't fulfill, but there's another partner that can fulfill it. And so those are the dot connectors to me that are so important. And if you burn any bridges, that's going to be the bridge you're going to have to come back to sooner or later. So that's why I won't burn a bridge. I will not create an enemy. I will not burn a bridge, because there's a lot of great organizations and great people doing great things in Delaware. And more importantly, let's talk about how we work together, not how we figure out that our program's stronger or whatever. Let's figure out how we complement each other.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's really First State Educate's position on everything that we do. This is the need to improve education in Delaware is a collective need, and it's no one person's fault. We all have an opportunity to contribute to the solution. So to the degree to which we can be a connector, provide a resource, create a platform, right? Help solve the problem. That's really who we want to be. We want to be known for our credibility, but really more to your point is having that network of nonprofits and those partners so that we can help everyone, achieve their mission.
Yeah. And that's, and to me, you're hitting the key points too, as an organization, because when you look at organizations such as the state chambers, the associations, the state chamber, the county chamber, then you start blending in Delaware Healthcare Facilities Association, the Medical Society of Delaware. Then we start massaging the other associations, because futuristic, if we do our job right, we're preparing these young people for those association memberships for great jobs. And so they're looking on the sidelines saying, all right, what school can we look at to get the best employees? Or how can we help prep them for college or whatever, if they need accreditation or if they need certifications? And there's where Del Tech comes in. And there's where University of Delaware, Del State University. To me, that's what gets exciting. If there's that tier effect, that then we get to how are we all working together to make sure we can make this happen?
Right. Yep. I agree. So before we move to the next segment, just one last question. A lot of this, I think, is, as I've said, and you're a special person. This approach that you use that is proven effective, right? Because of the success that the organizations that you've created and the boards that you've been on in your own, just your personal and professional trajectory. Are these things that you think are just sort of human nature, like they come naturally to you, or are there maybe some guiding principles? Is this something that, can be replicated? Is there some model there or key principles to follow?
Well, I really believe that I remember my pastor said, everybody in this church should be a missionary. You don't have to live over in Africa to be a missionary. And I remember years ago hearing that, and I'm like, wow, I'm a missionary. In my faith, I share the word of God, but the way I live, I should be God's hands extended by helping others, because he talks about helping the less fortunate, helping the poor. So when I look at that side of it, I'm always thinking, wow, we all have that in us.
Right.
But I think what catapulted mine was the instinct of getting out there and getting involved with these other organizations, and being, I might not serve on a committee or board, but I love the work that Maria Matos does at the Latin American Community Center, for example. So when I call Maria, she takes my call. Hey, Maria, because I want to figure out how we work together, how we make things happen. And so, but I think the sales side of me, in my security business, I kind of external affairs guy running the sales, is being able, not being afraid to get on the phone. I find people have that fear of either looking up to people or having an intimidation not to pick up the phone. And that person seems a little higher. They're a superintendent, or they're this or that. You almost put them on a pedestal instead of saying, wow, I have something I can offer them. And so there's where I think that I don't have, if it's for the good of everything, I don't have any problem making a phone call up and down this state. I don't care if it's a U.S. senator. If it's the right thing to benefit Delaware and our community, I have no problem doing it. And there's where I feel that's one of my strengths, because I'm not doing it for Dave Tiberi. Julia, I've known you long enough. You don't do it for Julia. You're doing it for the good of the people. And when you have that mindset, and to me, whoever watches this podcast, if they want to go to the next level, they should set a goal each month. Say, I'm going to identify 10 nonprofits that I'm going to reach out to and introduce myself. Tell them who I am. Or I'm going to introduce myself to my school district superintendent or his administration or the charter schools or whatever it may be. And getting to know the people. And it only takes, you're not calling to solicit anything. You're calling to introduce yourself and say, by the way, I'm here for you. And that's what I do. Sometimes it might just be saying, hey, by the way, I just read your article. That was really neat about what your school's doing. And then
it's the little thing.
You have a relationship.
Yep. That's a great point. So in our second segment, I'd like to talk a little bit about, because everything we've talked about so far is on the positive side. And I think a lot of times we have failures in our life too. We have challenging moments. We have those tough times. And in some ways, boards face tough times right now. They're trying to look at how they're going to improve outcomes for the students in their districts, right? How have you learned or how have you leveraged some of the most challenging moments in your life to be this wonderful, positive, creative force in the state?
Well, I would have to say is putting people around me a lot smarter than me. Because I would get frustrated and I'm like, there's so as a young guy, I didn't have a lot of times with parents the best role models. And so I remember when I was boxing, I started going to a friend who was a boxing promoter, an older guy, Gus Perotti, God rest his soul. Gus had a little barbershop, but he was a well-known local boxing promoter. I would sit at the barbershop and Gus says, Dave, what do you really like? And I said, well, I really like TV. And he says, well, what do you mean TV? I said, well, I'd love to be a talk show host. So it was through Gus and my relationship with Gus, by putting myself around people like Gus. Gus goes, I know a guy named Andy Urkel who does local cable. So Andy had me on as a guest. And then a few weeks later, he took me on as a co-host.
Oh, wow.
And embarked on a 22-year career that I had my own TV show and I built a TV studio. I started with planting seeds. I started talking to Gus. But I just put people around me that were experts, and I asked them would they help mentor me, and I do that. I have no agenda, but I do know that I'm going to put people around me a lot. If like Julia, I know you're sharp around the edges with all kind of with education because that's your passion. Well, I'm going to be smart enough if I want to go in a certain area. If I'm going to serve on a school board, I'm going to put myself. The Bible says iron sharpens iron. I'm going to put myself around some sharp knives. I mean, I want the sharpest people in the sharpest tools in the kitchen. Yeah. So the people, the same thing. I've done that through my whole career. When I got into TV, I started calling my friend Yuki Washington up in Philadelphia.
Oh my God, I haven't heard that name in forever.
But putting myself around those people because that's what they were the best at it. And I want to be where they are. So with that, I find myself when I'm around people, they try to accomplish these things on their own. If I served on a school board, I'm going to make sure I research the best people that were on that school board in the past and the successes they had. I want to make sure I take them out to breakfast and I spend more time with Leadership Delaware fellows because they're asking me a lot of questions. And I just think, well, people breathe truth into my life. I want to do that for them too. Yeah. I want to make sure that they don't skin their knees up in certain areas that I did. And so I would say, to capture that question is finding people that you admire and that you look up to, start spending time with them. Especially if you're sharp in certain areas that you need to sharpen yourself up. And I can tell you, it's really paid off for me.
That's great. It's a great recommendation for the audience, I think, and for myself as well. And in many ways, it really illustrates what we're trying to do with this podcast. We're trying to bring those informed, leaders and these bright minds and people who can share things and make it accessible, right? We're trying to democratize access to sort of best practices and these supports, because coming back, this improving education in Delaware is a collective effort. So we all have our roles to play, and you may not spend 90% of your day working on education, but you can make a contribution to the overall effectiveness of boards by sharing these kinds of insights. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Okay, so what do you think in terms of like just for school boards, if they were to adopt what it is that we're talking about right now, sort of surrounding ourselves with the best and the brightest, and maybe being willing to ask questions or to be a little vulnerable when we don't know exactly how we're going to get from point A to point B. Are there some ways that school boards could maybe use those approaches in their decision making?
Yeah, I find the formula of like right now I have the full list of nonprofits that are their go to,
Mm-hmm.
and really staying in contact with them and making sure that not only fulfill my needs, but I want to make sure if they have needs that I do the same for them.
Mm-hmm.
And like for example, I speak at a lot over the years. I speak probably all 19 school districts one time or another. I've spoken.
I've been there.
I've
Uh-huh.
volunteered so many times to speak at banquets and everything else, and I've had a
Uh-huh.
great experience up and down the state and seeing the great work these school districts are doing. So when I look at that and seeing the great work that they're doing, I think it would be easier if I was on the board or even recommending to them is finding out the areas right now. A lot of times in education, a lot of it's the home life of kids. And I learned that when I served on a Colonial School District Foundation board,
Mm-hmm.
is the families, there's a lot of broken homes where kids are being raised by a parent or parents that might be dysfunctional or a grandparent or a guardian, for example. And I look at this and I say, wow, if there was a way that the schools like what Colonial School District, Dr. Blakey, when he was the superintendent at Colonial, he brought in a partnership with AI Hospital and he donated a classroom that the classroom is now altered so the hospital can work with the family, not just the
Mm-hmm.
child. So to me, that is so important because that's what I saw on the foundation board of Colonial was how do we connect the dots
Right.
so the community leaders, the associations
Mm-hmm.
outside of the school district that
Yeah.
that they partner with
Yeah.
can also help fill like the food bank in the schools. I know there's
Right.
partnerships like that, but to me, more partnerships create more opportunities. Like I push,
Mm-hmm.
you heard me say this before, Julia. I've been pushing. We have over 40 boys and girls clubs statewide. A number of them in our schools after school.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the problems, a lot of the kids that we need to reach the most with our boys and girls clubs, our homework clubs and programs after
Right.
school, they don't have
Right.
access to get there. We
Right.
should be giving every kid in Delaware, our DART buses a lot of times are empty. We
Mm-hmm.
should be giving every kid till they're 18 a free, after school free pass to
Mm-hmm.
any
Mm-hmm.
Boys and Girls Club, any YMCA, any Latin American Community Center, after school programs, because these DART bus stops are all in the key areas that these
Mm-hmm.
kids could actually shuttle themselves in and then get back home. And these kids they'd have the opportunity to have after school care that the clubs offer already. And we should be the first state setting the precedent with these type of things.
Yeah. So yeah, I love these. These are really concrete examples, and I think, and correct me if I got it wrong, but it's the board understanding that they're not solving the problem all by themselves, and that there's all of these other resources in the community that can help them achieve what they're trying to do for kids. Because there's the after school program, there's the Boys and Girls Club, there's the health and wellness centers, right? And so if the boards work in conjunction with the other assets in the community, then the problem becomes a little bit easier to solve.
Yeah, and it's got to be a tremendous pressure because
Oh.
you might have 6 or 7 whatever the number of board members that are going to be on
Mhm.
board.
Mhm.
And so you have this board, and now once you get voted in, then you're under the microscope. I
Yep.
mean, you're being dissected because everybody has their opinions. Everybody's the armchair quarterback. So
Mhm.
I'm always like, I want to deflect that a little bit. So when I'm doing something, they're doing this as volunteers. So
Right.
I want to make sure that I bring in the army. If I'm on a
Mhm.
board,
To
I'm
help
a
them.
board member, I want to bring in the army of
Yeah.
support. And they're
Yep.
out there. And once you identify that army, there's
Mhm.
so many great community leaders out there that want to help.
Mhm.
And so the
Mhm.
more we
Mhm.
identify those organizations and associations, it becomes a strong collaborative effort, and it allows them to pass the football on to somebody else.
Yep.
And let in other areas that the district might have a concern in, then other associations can help pick that up.
Help out. Exactly right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Okay, so let's go to the third segment of our podcast, talking a little bit. Let's flip over to talk about what's the Delaware way, right? In Delaware, there's the Delaware
Are you
way.
saying that because I was born and raised here?
No, but I've learned it, right? And you and I have talked before
Uh-huh.
about this being kind of the secret weapon, right? That there's a way to catalyze the Delaware way to drive positive change. one thing that we've talked about before is like, that we're all one phone call away from each other, or that the networks are so manageable that it's possible to kind of get from one person to another person to another person to be able to solve the problem that you have. So could you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll go into how that would help public education?
Yeah, I think it's very hard. Like when I would train in Philadelphia or New York, or if I was fighting in Vegas or any part of the world, they used to joke, "Where's Delaware? Which state are you in?" And it became a joke after a while. But the more people to find out about Delaware realize that we're always one. The Democrat Republican politics, that you push that to the side. When something needs to get done, we call each other and we work together. I mean, for me, I remember I was about 2 years ago, a gentleman asked me to meet him down Seaford to help with a youth program in Seaford. So we're at this diner in Seaford. And so we're sitting there talking, and this guy walks by me, and he shakes my hand. He introduces himself. He said, I followed your career. And then it was about a $30 bill. Then he walks out, never got to thank him, and he picked up the bill. I said, that wouldn't happen in Philadelphia. That would not happen in New York.
It's true. It's really
true.
So
the other guy goes, the gentleman I was with, he goes, boy, that was very kind. I said, but that is like Delaware. That to me is, it happens so much when you're out and about and you're working with people. How many people so many people have the governor's cell phone number? That is so rare. I mean, to think that we have the governor's cell phone number, that when something's a big concern, that we can call him. As busy as that man is, that he would take the call. And that just goes not only to governor, but that corporate America. I work with a lot of CEOs here in the state in regards to behind the scenes when something's going on. And a great example is how we created Donate Delaware. And this is what I think, to your question, would also just help capture that is, so we ended up getting a whole list of political leaders, government leaders, House senators and state reps and council men and women up and down the state. When the pandemic hit, they were trying to get hand sanitizer, wipes, and masks in people's hands. So my buddy and I, we started Donate Delaware. And so
just like that.
Yeah. And so the pharmaceutical companies started giving us every week hundreds and hundreds of boxes of hand sanitizer. DuPont, W.L. Gore, these companies started giving us boxes of masks by the thousands. So Bank of America committed over the time period, probably over $500,000 to us to make sure that we continue to meet the community needs. But that just shows you that's the Delaware way.
Right.
From the corporate sector to the government sector to the education sector to the nonprofit sector, we figured out a way. We were calling each other, working with each other. It was so awesome, but we didn't have any hitches. Now, some things took a little longer than others, but then a group of people started coming around as volunteers that had pickup trucks, and they started making deliveries because we needed to speed up the process. So I said, you couldn't do that anywhere else.
Exactly. Right. So it's this ability to come together, for the community to come together, really, and everyone to kind of focus on a shared goal. So what would we need to change, or how would we need to communicate around the fact that Delaware is 45th nationally, and that this is something that we're clearly capable of doing better. Our students have potential. We have excellent educators. There's money in the school system, and they're looking at putting more. So like, what do you think is the way to kind of get people to try to do what you were able to do with Donate Delaware, is to get everyone focused on solving this shared problem and mobilizing to action?
Yeah, and I feel like the pressure is, I mean, I have a daughter and I have nephews and nieces that work in school districts throughout the state. A lot of school districts have my nephews and nieces as well as my own daughter. And I look at that and it's a shame, because the microscopes are on the districts. You're number 45, but and I'm sure every superintendent that would watch this podcast would say the same thing. We want to be number one. And as an athlete, as a business owner, we've been very successful in business. I've been successful in athletics, but even as a boxer, I never did anything alone. Everybody always says, man, you went in there, but I had great trainers. I had a great cut man. I had a great family around me, a great team of people that supported me. And it took a team to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're far off because I'm an optimist. And I really
Mhm.
believe it's a small state, just with the comments I made earlier, that if we start collaborating more and we start working together more, we are
Mhm.
not going to be denied. I
Yeah.
like the number one. I don't like the number one. I don't like that number 45. We're
Right. Right.
number one is an easy
Mhm.
number to get to when people work together. And so we're
Right.
not that far off. And
Mhm.
we have the associations, we have the nonprofits, we have the organizations and the groups that will work with the schools to make sure that can be
Mhm.
possible.
Yep. So why do you think it's important that we focus on improving public education? I mean, in all of the different seats that you've been in, and all of the with all the different hats that you've worn, in all the different communities that you've connected with, what's your read on why it's important for Delaware to become number one or to move up in rank in terms of public education?
Well, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I heard that University of Delaware students, the large number of students that don't stay in Delaware.
Hmm.
So we're losing a lot of our next generation. Delaware is becoming a retirement hub.
Mm.
And if we don't empower our next generation and we don't back our school districts and back our schools in general and get
Hmm.
behind them to push things forward, then the biggest concern will be that our next generation leaves the state and the corporations that are here, that puts them in a very tough situation to get the top-notch employees that we're looking for. And
Hmm.
so the last thing we want to see is companies to leave the state. And so
Yeah.
there's where, I'm 100%, I'm a public school kid. I'm a Colonial School District kid. I'm very
Hmm.
proud of it. And some of my friends, one friend is market president of Bank of America. Another friend's market president of JP Morgan Chase. Another one's CFO of Dover Downs. One's vice president of Del State University. So I'd say the public schools in Delaware has treated us well.
Yeah.
So I'm a big supporter of the public school system here in Delaware, but we have got to get behind them more than ever. And if
Hmm.
we don't, then the companies that are talking about settling here won't settle here or move on. So that's
Right.
why we have to be behind the school systems and do whatever we can to help them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a question of the quality of life in Delaware. It's a question of economic prosperity. But really, on a humanitarian level, it's a question about the right that each individual child has to realize their potential, right? And to be able to go on and have a meaningful life. So one last question for you, because as a world champ, you know what it is to train. You've created a wonderful world for yourself, but as you mentioned, there was a very large family, and things weren't always in abundance. So that took a lot of hard work. This is not going to be easy per se. I mean, it'll be easier if we work together and easier if we connect the dots. But what are some things that have helped you keep going when the road is long, right? And the mountain is steep and you've got to fight your way through. How does one get that resilience?
I think it's there's got to be a desire and a love. Um, I remember leaving a couple fights where I had stitches. I was cut over the eye, and that was a very tough. They were some tough nights, and they were because I would lay there and say, "Is this the right thing for me?"
Hmm.
And I think first of all, I had to identify that myself. Like, is this where I really want to be? Am
Hmm.
I the right guy to be doing this? I
Hmm.
really believed that in my Christian faith, I would say, Lord, is this where you
Hmm.
really want me?
Hmm.
And is this the best way I could be your hands extended? And I think that everybody in leadership has to ask that question to themselves. Like,
Hmm.
where are we? Like I say Team Tiberi because that's what they used to say, Team Tiberi.
Hmm.
So Team Tiberi, I've got to be open with my trainer, my cut man, my manager, everybody on my team to say, guys, am I the right guy? I mean, am I like
Hmm.
where I'm at right now? I've got cut. I'm struggling. I didn't look as good the
Right.
last fight, and then Marty Feldman, my old trainer, used to say, he said, Dave, the only one's going to stop you is Dave Tiberi.
Hmm.
And he said, if Dave wants to be the best, then Dave has got to step out and lead by example. And he said, trust me, everybody will follow. And he is
Mm.
an old school guy. I mean, he didn't have a ton of education himself. He was like a high school graduate, but he went right into boxing. He was very successful and made a lot of money. but he would always bring up the fact, he said, it all starts with your desire. He said, if you don't have the desire, maybe you're not in the right seat. And so to me, I've carried that. Like when I would sit at a table, I remember my sister Teresa said one time, she said, Dave, I would go to meetings, and early on, it was a little intimidating being around a bunch of CEOs. And she said to me, she used to say, Dave, before you walk in a meeting, you need to say, little Dave, sit down, big Dave's taking over.
Oh, I like that.
So when I go into meetings and events, I have no fear, no intimidation.
Yeah.
When I go in a meeting, I belong in that meeting more than anybody else. And to me, that's leadership. When somebody says, I don't care what anybody else is saying, I know we're taking this journey. And that's why, I love, I love Dr. Menzer, the superintendent over Colonial. He and I work closely. I love that these superintendents, Joe Jones at the Votech School. These are great.
Yeah, they're great guys.
And I could keep going on and on. Dr. Bob Andrzejewski at Christina District.
Another one.
There's a transformation going on over Christina. I see some big things happening. And I could go up and down the state and say that about many of the superintendents. So how do we get behind them? And they're that Dave Tiberi, ready to fight the biggest fight of their life.
Right.
And that it was because then by me sharing my trainer's thoughts and his love for me, that he says, the only thing, Dave's going to stop you is yourself. He said, you're so close to the top of that mountain. And he said, trust me, he said, you got busted up a little bit. He says, some people slide down the mountain, but then they have to work harder to get back up. So to me, Delaware, we just need to get behind these superintendents through these school boards, work harder, figure out what we're doing right, figure out what we're doing wrong. And every boxer had to have a strong team around them. As they say, I wasn't an individual. To me, if every superintendent has the right team around them and those board members take it serious and said, you know what, I'm going to see you out in the community who the other teammates are. Start bringing them into the fold. And that's what I do well. When we started Donate Delaware, when I serve on the board, I figure out the Catholic Charities Board is who else do we need to bring into the fold and make this improve.
Yep. Fabulous. This was a fabulous conversation. We could go on for hours. I hope to have you back, Dave, but thank you for sharing. I think some big points for me to take away is like connecting the dots, and that one quote about service to humanity is the best work, sort of remembering why we're in it, and picking up the phone and talking to people, like putting yourself out there and figuring out, like this great example that you gave about how do we leverage the Delaware way. So this has been incredibly valuable for me. I'm sure that our audience benefited equally. And thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us.
Thank you, Julie. And I challenge individuals that are out there that are looking for something to do. Look at a board position. Take the opportunity of seeing what's going on in your district. Call the superintendent, spend time and ask them questions, ask staff members, ask teachers. You can be a tremendous value to your district if you make that commitment. And then it allows you to spread your wings from some of the things that I've learned and I've been successful with, is then being able to help them connect to the community.
Exactly. And First Aid Educate's here to help anyone who's going to raise their hand and consider running in the 2025 election. Thank you, Dave. Thank you to our audience. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks.